खेल रेडियो पर आप सभी का बहुत बहुत स्वागत है. Thank you so very much to our viewers and listeners for tuning into our very first episode of Khel Radio, of the very first series which we are going to be covering on the Under-17 FIFA Women's World Cup that is being held in India. This series is rightfully titled as The Awakening of the Sleeping Giant, which is indicative of a super positive approach towards making India a great footballing nation. I am Akash Batra, co-founder and host of Khel Radio and a trainee with 14 Sports Law, a boutique international sports law firm based in Portugal. Today, I have the absolute pleasure and honor to be joined by my dear friend and colleague, Riya Mishra, the co-founder of Khel Radio and SLPRR, and also my co-host for today's podcast, along with none other than our Khel Radio's partner and mentor, again, my dear friend, Mr. Abhishek Sharma, who is also the co-founder of Athletes Today. We also have with us today a very special guest, Mr. Randeep Barua, who is the head of Academy of Women's Football at Odisha FC, a top-notch Indian football club. Thank you so much, guys, for tuning in today on this podcast. And for setting the mood of this discussion, I would like to quote Liverpool legend Bill Shankly, and I'm very sure that everyone on this panel would have the same feeling about this statement. And Bill has rightfully quoted, and I verbatim requote, that some people believe that football is a matter of life and death. I am very much disappointed with that attitude, and I can assure you that it is much, much more important than that. With that mindset and giving women's football the priority today, through this podcast, we shall do justice to the cause of development of women's football in India and get the attention to our young Indian Blue Tigresses, which is much, much deserved. So I now invite Abhishek to take over the mic and enlighten our viewers with some primary thoughts about his feelings on this World Cup and what he thinks.
Hi guys, thank you Akash for having me. Thank you for having Randeep and having this discussion and this initiative for the audiences and people to know more about women in sports, women in football specifically, since we are covering the Under-17 World Cup and the aspects of it. Some of the basic key things that I would like to touch upon with the Under-17 World Cup, which is happening very soon and for the first time in India for the women's sports, is the fact that the way India is now looked at globally is one point which is very, very important to me, working in the background with sports, and when I represent players just not from India and from abroad as well, and the connections that I have with people globally, the perception of India has changed. The way people are looking at India, that perception has changed. So when tomorrow, because the buzz about the Under-17 World Cup is so huge, I have people writing to me from all over the world being very excited about, oh, this is the first time like a FIFA Women's World Cup, does India even have a girls team? People are not even aware of things like that. And of course, for someone like me who's smiling back and replying to them saying, I think just not the women's football team, but overall, women in sports in India are the sleeping giants, are the people who are going to deliver, and the statistics and the facts just clearly state that in the last 12 to 15 years that I see the top-notch athletes who won gold medals, silver medals, or at Olympics or Commonwealth or individual sports in different World Cup have maximum been women. So I think this was a great opportunity for FIFA to come here and for the world to notice all of us, and especially the girls team, so that makes me extremely happy. The second point is I got a lot of response from people everywhere saying, where is Bhubaneswar? So that brings another smile to my face to tell them that, this is in Odisha. You must have noticed Odisha. If you follow field hockey, you must have gotten an idea. There's a state in India, and India is very different. So it's also nice for people like me to introduce just not to the Indian people. A lot of the Indian people also can't believe it that the World Cup is happening in Bhubaneswar. Why Bhubaneswar? I've been asked this a lot of times. but there are multiple reasons why Bhubaneswar, and you can put a smile on your face to know and tell it loud and proud to people outside that it's in Bhubaneswar. It's a very nice, beautiful part of India. It comes in the east side, and it's nice. So these are two things that I am really excited about, for in a very generic way. Um, to see that, first of all, the under 17 World Cup is happening, so our girls are going to get that opportunity. Second, it's happening in a state that nobody expected it to happen in, because FIFA compliances are very strong. Yeah, it's not a easy compliance. I have worked with those guys. I know those guys. Randik, from his background, knows about these things. So those compliances and everything that they reach out to you, it's difficult to fulfill. And hats off to the government, hats off to the partnership. It's only Mr. Patnayak's help and the push to promote Odisha that this has happened. So this is my opener to say that there's nothing like it. There's no better time in Indian football to be excited about than now. And this is the time where a young base of fans can come together. They can start supporting and investing their time into football, and especially women's football. So yeah, this is all that I would have to say currently.
Thank you so much, Abhishek. I think that's exactly what we want to touch upon, how this World Cup brings so many opportunities to India, and that's something I think we would love to hear from you, sir, Randeep sir, about also, how this World Cup is acting as a stepping stone towards making India the hub for football, both in terms of men's football and women's football. So how is this World Cup providing that to India? Is something I think is very interesting, and we would love to hear from you about that.
Thank you, first of all, for having me here, Akash and Ria and Avi. Uh, I think, I don't really get on to talk shows and stuff like that. So it's sort of, it's not really my comfort zone. But I'm very happy to be here because we're talking about a very exciting event that's coming up in just a couple of days' time now. And like, as you asked me, what it does, an event such as a World Cup, what it does to the legacy of the sport in a particular place is that it gives it the missing impetus to grow the sport in more ways than one. And I'll give you particular examples as we go along. But what the 2017 World Cup did is that it brought a lot of youngsters to the fore who today are playing in the ISL. Just yesterday, we saw Jackson Singh. He was the first goal scorer in a FIFA tournament for India, right? Even though it was the under 17. But today, I was scrolling through Twitter, and someone said Jackson Singh is the best young Indian midfielder. And looking at him, he looks so formidable and strong, and he's still very young. He's just in his 20s, early 20s now. But what it did is give these boys the chance to grow out of that, that mold, and be looked at a more senior professional level where they could be playing, whether it's Jackson, whether it's Dheeraj, Nintoy, all these boys. And that is what I hope will do for these girls tomorrow who are going to participate in the women's World Cup in the under 17 from the under 17 team, who step into a senior national team role, and who also get the opportunity to play for clubs like ours, professional clubs that are trying to build the right ecosystem to give them the opportunity to pursue football professionally. But sometimes an event such as a World Cup or a big tournament gives that little impetus to the players especially, and also to the stakeholders to invest more into that sport. Like Abhi was saying, how the government has worked so hard and to put Bhubaneswar on the sporting map. Believe me, I live here. I know that. And I see it every day because my office is in the stadium, lucky me. And I get to see how much of investment is really going into building Bhubaneswar and Odisha into a proper sports hub. Because it's not just about the events, it's also about the infrastructure. Until and unless we learn to invest in the infrastructure correctly, we'll all be the same all the time. Nothing is really going to change or improve. But when you have a FIFA event here, your infrastructure improves dramatically. Your local human resource improves dramatically because you're involved in that event. So, you get your resources to learn so much more about how to organize a huge tournament, a massive tournament like a FIFA World Cup. Um, so these are these little things that help, just beyond the athletes also, but to bring up the status of any particular place. And for the, small town, like, I mean, now we shouldn't call it a small town anymore, like a slightly smaller city like Bhubaneswar, it's a massive fillip because the government wants to see the good work that it's doing. And very rightly so. They are putting in a lot of effort with the sort of infrastructure that is being built around for sports. You have four fantastic grounds over here, fantastic grounds, the Capital Ground, the Battalion Grounds, two of them next to each other. Then of course you have two pitches at the stadium as well. So, and then there is a complete artificial turf at Unit 1, which is very good quality. Usually you don't get good quality turf pitches, and I'll be honest about that. But this one's really good. So now what needs to happen next is somewhat the responsibility of people like us to utilize those resources and infrastructures to start developing football from the grassroots level and make sure that it becomes a continued pathway for kids to play football at a senior level at some point, for the club, for other clubs. But whatever it is, as a presence in the state and as a presence in the country, we want to be one of those sort of leaders, if you like, to help kids pursue football professionally, and especially for girls, which is why the Odisha FC women's team, we know, and we hear a lot about the talent that's here in Odisha as far as women's football is concerned, and this this is the opportunity for someone like the club to invest properly into developing that aspect of the sport. So with the World Cup coming here, people taking notice of Bhubaneswar and Odisha. And Odisha is a beautiful state as well. So it's going to be good for the future of the game in this sport, in this city, and also for the country as well, because you're getting a new place where I wouldn't say a new place, but a place where you understand that there is professional infrastructure available to you to conduct your big events and big sporting events. And I think that's a good way to show, aspiring players and young players that, look, if you want to pursue it professionally, there are these opportunities for you tomorrow as you grow up. And yeah, I think that's where we are right now, and I think that's where we're going to start building up from, at least in terms of the women's game, just like what happened with the boys' game in 17.
That's absolutely right, sir. So when you draw a comparison with the Under-17 Men's World Cup, which was held back in 2017, I think it's quite notable that nearly all of the players from that squad are currently like playing at good clubs. They are shining bright. You mentioned Jigson. I know players such as Amarjeet. There are absolutely amazing players such as Komal Thatal, who got a name for themselves during the Under-17 World Cup when it was happening. And similar to that, I think the current edition of the Women's World Cup will also bring the same amount of opportunities, the same resources and outlets for these young players to shine. And other than that, specifically like noting about the venue of this World Cup, so the current edition of the 7th edition of the Women's World Cup is being held in 3 states, which are Odisha, Goa, and Maharashtra, with the matches which will be played at the Kalinga Stadium, Bhubaneswar, at Margao, Goa, and in the Navi, Mumbai. But one interesting point which I was thinking here is that when we have, when we have great footballing hubs in India, such as the states of Calcutta or so to say Delhi, then why are the organizing committee of the World Cup, why is the organizing not happening in these particular states? Why is the World Cup only restricted to 3 particular areas of India? And I think there could be both positive as well as negative points to take from that, and I would very much want to hear Abhishek's opinion about the venues and why only these 3 states and not Calcutta.
Okay, number one, I'd like to correct you. Let's not call Delhi a football hub. Okay, let's get that right. Okay.
Yeah.
Because I get see, okay, coming jokes apart. Okay, see, what we are trying to do with this new system, or especially this happening in Bhubaneswar, you have to understand that Um, India is just not about football in Bengal, and India is just not about football in Kerala or in Delhi. Uh, there's more to India. There's more talent that comes out of India. I would have loved for the fact if the compliances worked out, one of the games could have been done in one of the states in the Northeast, maybe closest being Assam. Uh, but the idea is to take football everywhere, right? So if you try and understand and look back at FIFA in the last 40, 50 years, FIFA has consciously made an effort to take football to every different continent, with Africa being the last continent in 2010 when they took the football to. So the idea is to take football everywhere. Now, if I take that global aspect into the Indian context, it just made more sense to do it where you have a lot of support from the government, where like how Randeep earlier said, they are building a very good infrastructure. So they are building all of this so that they want to get more global events to Bhubaneswar. They would want more support from private partners. At the end of the day, Odisha FC is a private partner, right? So if tomorrow the Odisha government builds a very good stadium, builds a lot of infrastructure, who's going to utilize it, right? It has to be people like private partners like Odisha FC who's coming in, or Hockey India who's having maximum of their matches there. They for hockey though it's even more phenomenal because they big 16 grounds for the World Cup, which is going to happen in January, right? They've taken the sport and the grounds to Raulkela. I don't think so. Alexander Hendricks, the best player sitting out of Belgium, would have an idea that he's going to play in Raulkela, but it's happening. So that is the difference. I think the state of Odisha is trying to do, and I think that is fantastic. That is the future. Now football cannot be limited. I am Calcutta born, brought up. I'm very proud of Bengal. I'm very proud of my culture of football. But it's just not limited to me, right? If I don't start this culture in a place, so for example, if this is happening in Bhubaneswar, and like Randeep said, it's the grassroots development will play a massive impact. The psychological effect, if tomorrow for this World Cup, when you see a parent taking a 5-year-old kid for that experience is going to stay with the kid for the next 20, 30, 40 years of their lives, and they will remember this. And that's how memories and legacies and all of this is made. Because I had that in Bengal. I went for my first football game with my grandfather. That's why I'm emotional about football in Bengal. So I think this cultural dynamic, this psychological impact on people, all of this is a very positive to look at. Now, coming back to, apart from Bhubaneswar, Goa is a fantastic ground. You're going to get a lot of response from a lot of the Goan culture, Goan market. They're fantastic people. I lived there during the after the pandemic. I stayed there for like a year, in between probably. So it's fantastic. It's a fantastic culture. People are more open and they are totally football oriented. You go to a Goan and ask them about any other sport, I don't think so they care. But when it's football, like they do. So I think it's a very interesting place to take it. That to someone like a Goa becomes a very interesting aspect for FIFA to take it than for India to consciously make the tournament there, because Goa is going through a transition of they have to rebuild. Back from the day where you would have Salgaonkar, Dempo, Churchill, the really top competitive clubs, and the Goan culture was buzzing with football. Now is let's rebuild that. Let's start that culture again. It's still there, but with the glamour, with the powerhouses coming now, there are some key areas that are not yet taken care of. So it's a very good rebuilding phase that I personally think, taking this World Cup to Goa, because it'll reunite the people. You need to rebuild that structure around the Goan people. So that is going to be interesting. DY Patil is a good ground, but I always knew that it's going to come to Navi Mumbai no matter what you do. It's not one of my favorite places for the World Cup to happen. I would have loved to see Kochi, because I would love to see the crowd there, or Bengal, to be honest. But it's happening in Navi Mumbai. It's going to be an experience. So this is my take. I personally think that taking it to different places, and maybe, I don't know, in the future, if we have more big tournaments, I would love to see tournaments happening in maybe somewhere in Madhya Pradesh, Telangana, Hyderabad, interesting places where you can build a culture. Because once a big tournament happens, like this FIFA World Cup that happens, it's going to leave like a long lasting impact on the people of Orissa, on the people in Bhubaneswar, on the kids, on the regular people, on the regular Odia people who stay there. And that is where the change will come. So this is what I think is the impact.
Thank you so much, Abhishek. I think that was beautifully put. As someone from Bhubaneswar, it is very hard for me to hold back when Bhubaneswar is being praised or great things are happening to Odisha. So absolutely, like you said, a sport grows when you inculcate it into society, emotionally get attached to it. And I remember growing up, there wasn't a lot of sporting events that would happen in Bhubaneswar. We used to be the home ground for Sunrisers Hyderabad, so we got to watch a few IPL matches. But I remember a couple of years back, the Hockey World Cup happened in Bhubaneswar, and that was a huge deal. Everybody was talking about Bhubaneswar. Somehow, everybody started knowing where Bhubaneswar is finally. So that was amazing. Like, it was absolutely thrilling to watch that unfold in a city where I've grown up and I've seen that gap exist and that gap being bridged. It's very, very interesting and very exciting to see. And as you said, like, I think this is one of the campaigns that FIFA also ran for its for women in football. That if you can see it, you can be it. And I think that's very apt, like picking up places where football, I'm sure there are players everywhere. India is crowded with people who are filled with talent, have sporting talent, and there's talent everywhere. So I think picking up these places to hold such events is very exciting because it helps, again, like also with grassroots development of the sport. And taking it from there, I would like to ask Randeep sir to take over and tell us a little bit about how the different stakeholders in this industry can help in the development of grassroots level sports. And I would specifically, we would really enjoy it if you could tell us a little bit about your role in fostering development of football at the grassroots level, specifically referring to women's football, which is, I think, the most exciting part of the hours. So if you can tell us your take on that, that'll be really interesting.
Sure, yeah. Look, I think the first and foremost, the most important thing that any stakeholder in Indian football can do in developing the grassroots is to make yourselves accessible. And when you make yourselves accessible with the right sort of infrastructure that is available to you and you alone, because that is under your purview and your control, you are basically going out to the people and asking them to come to you as well. It's a two-way relationship where you go out and you take your programs with you through your coaches and your coaching systems, and you have a philosophy to work towards in building the sport right from a very, very young age upwards. You have the right people to conduct your programming, and at the same time you have something to show them and come back to, like, you know, the matches at the stadium, your ISL matches or something. So you start building a relationship between where you start and where you end right from the beginning, and you do that by being as accessible and as much as you can out there in the community as you possibly can be. For me, I have always believed in one thing, is that until and unless you have your own infrastructure, when I see infrastructure, I mean your own physical infrastructure, your own office spaces or your offices or your training grounds and stuff like that, you are basically reliant on multiple other factors to conduct your own work. You have to go out and find these things that are not easily accessible or may not even exist in certain places, but you want to do certain programming there. But having said that, if you start building your basics right from the start, and you grow and that becomes sort of your vantage point to go out into the world, then people relate that to you as important. Like people relate that to you first. Say they know where your physical address is, and your physical address is a very important aspect of it, because that is the base of your route, and from there it spreads everywhere you go, right? So you need to have that physical presence to say we belong here, and from that you start taking, and that's where you start taking your programs and your programming and everywhere outside to the people at large. But what I really want for these young girls to do is to be inspired to play football. Okay, and I think that is where we as a club have that responsibility, where Gokulam has that responsibility, Kerala Blasters, FC Goa, just name it, all the clubs out there who are participating and want to do something for women's football. This is part of our responsibility to give these girls a platform. And when I say a platform, not just one to come and jump off on and off, no, a long-term platform for them to grow and develop and become, uh, you know, become professionals playing football. That's important because right now all the players are amateurs, right? They're all playing on amateur contracts. They come play a tournament, make a bit of money, and go home. That's not it. That does nothing for them. You need to help them stabilize themselves. You need to help them rise in station, and whatever little or max you can do for that, it's well worth it.
That's absolutely right, sir. When you focus on the fact that what we need essentially is more outlet and more infrastructure, and we don't lack talent, that is absolutely true. Recently, we have seen like even the men's players, players like Jingan who were called to play in Europe and who proved their mettle also, players like Aditi who played and shined for West Ham. And currently also we have a lot of Indian players like Sahel, for example, like people, getting offers from so many clubs around the world. And I do think that if we are able to sort of like change the dynamic and the current Indian footballing scenario from having that shift of following from a top to bottom approach and moving towards a bottom to top approach by working at the grassroots at the flat ground level, I think we do have the required talent for our players to shine in future. And apart from that, sir, you rightfully mentioned the demography and the state wise distribution of these players in the Indian footballing setup. And I think that is quite interesting to note, because you mentioned that at a point of time there were nine people from Odisha who were there in the team, and currently, if I'm not wrong, I think there's only one. And notably, the squad.
Two actually, if Manisha and Pyari are pretty regular.
Yeah.
Jabba has been in and out. Supriya has also been in and out. So at the moment, I'd still say two, but I want that number to grow very, very soon. That's there.
Yeah, interestingly, I would like to emphasize that there are 6 people in the squad just from Jharkhand, and I am hoping that 5 out of those 6 will be also the starting 11. And yeah, in terms of that, in that regard, my next question will be to Abhishek to sort of like understand this dynamic of distribution of state-wise share of women's football specifically in India, and also to sort of understand what kind of struggles, demographic struggles, the social and educational, and the whole complete scenario of a lot of things which goes into the play with respect to these players coming up and getting the opportunities to play. And since you are personally in touch with these players, you have been working with them at the grassroots, I think you'll be better able to tell our audience about the struggles and the stories which these people have, because I was reading up on the 6 girls from the Jharkhand state who have made it to the team, and all 6 of them have had their own struggles, have really struggled hard, and have come from not a very good social and economic backgrounds, and still they have made it to the team. And I think it's important for us to sort of understand the role which these state federations also play in terms of promoting talent, because sport, I think in my opinion, sport has developed privately throughout ages. Like sport has been in the hands of the private sector, and we have been moving towards like a P3 model to sort of achieve like a private public partnership, and which has worked for a lot of countries apparently. And I think right now India has also, like, again in consonance with our title, they have awakened the Odisha government. They are doing absolutely great. They are running campaigns and initiatives including the Kick Off the Dream program. And yeah, I think I would, if you can, Abhishek, if you can tell the viewers more about this sort of state-wise share and what the governments can essentially do to improve the picture.
Yeah. So, okay, so I will just come back to, I'm a massive supporter of the P3 model. This is something that I have always believed in. And since the time that I've taken up entrepreneurship or I have been working in sports, um, this is something that I always emphasized on. So if I would go for multiple government conferences, or if I would go to private conferences, P3 model is something that I would be very vocal about, because that is how India can grow. Genuinely India, it's very easy to say India does not have the talent or things like that. India does have the talent. It depending on when you are finding that talent, especially for someone like me, where I have seen all types of the spectrum. I have organized one of the biggest grassroots leagues in India. Moving to that, I ran a residential football academy. From that to working with the senior team. So I've seen the spectrum entirely, how this can be worked out. So I think P3 is a great model. It's something that a lot of the states currently in India should recognize it. And like earlier Randeep had said, I would be saying people reading would know about all of these things, is the fact that if you have the government who's very much interested in building something, then the private parties can always get involved. So, at the end of the day, if Odisha is taking an initiative like that, it's only going to have that much growth. And like Randeep had earlier said in his conversation, what Odisha FC is trying and things like that, I would come back to also one more point that he mentioned, that they are having the under 13, 15, 18, and they have the top-notch players who are playing for India, right? And that gap has to be bridged, because it's like a co-learning, cohesive experience for these girls who are there. But it also then, in the long run, should be a very important initiative. I know Odisha will be working on it, is to go back to the grassroots level. And when I say grassroots, I mean age 5 is where you start from. Usually the aspect of grassroots in India, people think it's from the age 10 or 12 and all of that, but no, the grassroots real level has to be age 5, and that's where you start from. And if you can build an environment that is at age 5, they don't have to be professional players, but they have to experience the sport. They have to go enjoy the sport. They have to look forward to going every Sunday, dragging their parents to go play or whatever they enjoy. Could be football, could be any other sport. So I think that will lead to a massive change in the way people look at the sport. And like Randeep had earlier said, there are opportunities for these girls to do, to do better, to be professional, to be employed, to make a career in sports. So yeah, I think that is one part of it. Second, I would just quickly want to touch on the fact that in the more realistic aspect, there are Odisha is doing it, Kerala is doing it. There are more clubs who are doing it. There is a higher possibility of these clubs to be successful as a football unit in Europe with the women's team than with the men's team. And that is our reality. And we have to accept it and we have to back it. Even when Gokulam went for the AFC and everything, and Gokulam gave their best shot, it was a moment of pride for every Indian, to be honest, to see the girls team who the girls team are playing in a league that is for 1.5 months, and I've been very vocal and critical about it to AIFF. Okay, I somehow don't believe it, that it's a proper structure. But with that limited gap, with that limited resource, we pulled something different off, and we're playing in Asia. So now when clubs like Odisha, Kerala Blasters, Goa, there are more clubs who are looking at it. They themselves recognize the fact that, hello, there is a better opportunity for the girls to represent the club and the franchise and to do well in the Asian market, in the AFC, than for our men's team to ever reach there. and honestly, with like, this is, I don't work with the club, so I'm not employed by the club. I'm an external person, but this is my opinion. For someone like Randeep, what is very, very much interesting is the fact that if his vision and his timing goes right, and if he's backed by the club, in 4 years, I would rather, in 3 to 4 years, I would see Odisha FC women's team be a stronger competitive force in AFC than the men's team will ever reach there. This is my thought. This is what I would feel. Because then I would see a process, and there are chances of them being more successful than the men's team. This is my belief. So yeah, this was on that. Talking about the states and the different demographics, I'll just touch on a couple of players that I find very interesting in this squad. And Jharkhand has always had talent. I represent Salima Tete, the youngest and the most talented player in women's hockey, who's there. And Salima is fantastic. Like, I have never seen a hockey talent like that. So Jharkhand has always been, people know there's a lot of talent, but it's just been ignored because of the social, political, economic situation.
That even I am very much excited to, to see how this pans out, how the games against USA and Brazil, which are the heavyweights in women's football currently, and how our young blue tigresses will fight against them. And I'm very sure that they'll get a good result. And if not a good result, I'm definitely so much sure that it's
Exactly, we
going
put
to be
a
a
fight.
great fight.
The idea is for us to put a fight. And
Exactly.
US, right? US women's team, US is the number one. Okay, they perform, they do well. They've been like, there's no doubt about it.
Yeah.
So I think it's going to be interesting when you see like a super developed country in all aspects, and then a team like India. And if suppose there's a positive that comes out of it, it's only a learning, and people in the system should take that as a learning and grow it more.
Exactly.
Earlier, when the World Cup was happening, I have a lot of questions. Maybe I'll leave it for another pod. I love the fact that so many things are happening to these girls, but I also, there's a lot of things that AIFF has gotten this World Cup, but there's no legacy plan. What is a 5-year plan? What is a 3-year plan? How are these women going to grow? So these are very hard-hitting questions, and maybe that can be covered sometime else. But the reality of it is, when we play teams like US and Brazil, whatever be the outcome, we should be out loud and proud, and only take it to the next level and not let it stop. If we lose 5-0, don't come back at it and be like, okay, we are not good enough. You build from whatever that experience has been. And that is where I would want like a lot of people to recognize this. A lot of listeners from the podcast who are going to listen to this is to go support, to start following, to know these names, to see these girls do well. That's about it. It's not a difficult ask, but if you can just find out a couple of girls who are doing well, just see them on TV, just see their game, that much itself is very helpful. Yeah.
That's definitely very right. And I think for our viewers, it is important that we also name down the squad so that everyone knows the squad which has been announced by India for the World Cup. And I'll just quickly name the squad and our very much talented young players. The goalkeepers for the Indian national under-17 team are Mona Lisa Devi, Melody Chanu, and Anjali Munda. The defenders are Astam, Kajal, Nikita, Purnima, Varshika, and Shilki Devi. The midfielders are Babina Devi, Neetu Linda, Shelja, and Shubhangi Singh. And finally, the forwards are Anita Kumari, Linda Kom, Neha, Reja, Shelya, Kajol, Lavanya, and Sudha. And I think we also have some very recent precedent in our favor when Abhishek, when you mentioned that, like even though we are going to be playing against footballing giants, we are going to put a fight. And I think recently when we went to Spain for the recent friendly matches, we did show up a good fight against Sweden, which is the third ranked women's football country in the world. We managed to score 1 goal, and one was the total tally of the Indian men's football World Cup team back in 2017, and I'm sure that our women are going to break that record. And yeah, I think, and also they played against this local Spanish club WSS, and they scored a massive 17 goals in 90 minutes, which is pretty great to note.
I'm also expecting a lot of new and different things from the AIFF management with Mr. Kalyan Chaubey sir and all of these guys coming in. Let's see what they do. But I definitely don't want some dummy league around IWL for 1.5 months. There's no sense of, so imagine, just think of it in just generic basis. Players play 12 to 10 matches a year. Is that enough for a domestic league player to play? And then you expect them to win matches when they are playing against big countries and they're going abroad. So we as fans also should be very realistic, where what we are doing, how things are going to be. So yeah, that's just my take on it.
Exactly, that's very true. I think the importance of having a proper and structured, like a proper roadmap and the ecosystem at the grassroots level, at the proper hierarchy, is very much important. And I think, considering Indian football, everything right now is very much distorted. Like the champions of I League are playing in some other league, the champions of ISL is playing in some league. The states are not ready to cooperate. I League wants something else, FDF, SDL wants something else. So I think to be able to reach a consensus, Abhishek, you are very right that it'll have to start from the top, and AIFF will have to be more proactive, more intelligent, more smart, in order to achieve the objective of making India a great footballing nation. And I think the recent times have proven that if AIFF doesn't buckle up, they are not going to be let go of easily. We saw the recent FIFA ban, and that can happen again. So we'll have to be very careful with that. And on a concluding note, I thank you all for tuning in today, and I thank the viewers. And the AFC roadmap and much more is going to be discussed in the next episode of this podcast. So please tune in with us. Please join the next episode to know more about the Under-17 Women's World Cup, to get more details about these players, to be updated with everything that is happening in India with respect to this World Cup. And I'm sure that after today's episode, we have had so many key takeaways from the various opinions of the stakeholders which are present here on this panel. And I'm sure that it was equally intriguing for all our viewers and listeners. Thank you so much, guys, for tuning in. Until the next episode, adios, amigos.